Normandy, June 1944. Sergeant William "Buck" Crawford pressed his back against the cold concrete wall of a German bunker. Inside he could hear voices, movement, the metallic click of weapons being readied. His squad was pinned down behind him. 2 men were already dead. A machine gun nest at the end of the trench had stopped their advance cold. Someone had to go in. Crawford checked his weapon. Not the standard issue M1911 automatic pistol that every other NCO carried. Instead, he held a heavy, old-fashioned revolver. 6 shots. No reload under fire. A weapon that belonged to his father's war, not his. The lieutenant had laughed when he first saw it. "What is that, Sergeant? Your grandfather's antique? You planning to fight Germans or rob a stagecoach?" "That thing's a toy, Crawford. Get yourself a real pistol." But Crawford had refused. He'd carried this revolver through North Africa, through Sicily, through Italy, and now into the hedgerows of France. 6 shots had always been enough. He took a breath, kicked the door, and stepped into the darkness. 8 seconds later, he walked out. Behind him lay 6 German soldiers. He hadn't missed once. To understand why Crawford's choice seemed so foolish, you need to understand the evolution of military sidearms. The revolver was the king of handguns for nearly a century. From the 1830s through the early 1900s, every military in the world issued revolvers to their officers and cavalry. The Colt Single-Action Army, the Webley, the Smith & Wesson Model 3. These were the weapons that won wars. Then John Browning changed everything. In 1911, the United States Army adopted the M1911 semi-automatic pistol. It held 7 rounds in the magazine plus 1 in the chamber. When you pulled the trigger, it fired and automatically chambered the next round. When the magazine ran empty, you dropped it out, slammed in a fresh one, and kept shooting. The revolver couldn't compete on paper. A revolver held 6 rounds. When empty, you had to swing out the cylinder, eject the spent casings, and reload each chamber individually. Under fire, with shaking hands and enemies closing in, this process took an eternity. By World War II, the semi-automatic pistol was standard issue for the American military. The M1911 had proven itself in the trenches of the First World War. It was reliable, powerful, and modern. The revolver was obsolete, a relic, something your father might have carried. Yet some soldiers still preferred them. Crawford was one of those soldiers, and his reasons weren't sentimental. The M1917 revolver that Crawford carried had advantages that the M1911 couldn't match. First, absolute reliability. The M1911 was a complex mechanism. It had a slide, a recoil spring, a barrel that tilted during the cycling process, and dozens of small parts that had to work in perfect synchronization. In the mud and sand of combat, any of these parts could fail. The revolver was mechanically simple. Pull the trigger, and the cylinder rotated. The hammer fell. The round fired. There was almost nothing that could go wrong. In the deserts of North Africa, Crawford had watched M1911s jam when sand infiltrated the slide mechanism. His revolver kept firing. In the mountains of Italy, he'd seen pistols freeze in the bitter cold, their actions locked solid. His revolver kept firing. The weapon was primitive, but primitive meant reliable. Second, superior accuracy on the first shot. The M1911's trigger pull was inconsistent. The first shot required a long, heavy pull to release the hammer from the safety position. Subsequent shots were shorter and lighter. This inconsistency affected accuracy, especially for soldiers who didn't practice constantly. The revolver's double-action trigger was the same every time. Pull after pull after pull. Crawford's muscle memory was calibrated perfectly. He knew exactly how much pressure it took to break the shot. In close combat, that consistency meant hits instead of misses. Third, psychological certainty. With a revolver, you knew exactly how many rounds you had left. You could feel the cylinder's position. You could count your shots without conscious thought. The M1911's magazine created uncertainty. Did you load 8 rounds or 7? Did the last shot eject properly? In the chaos of combat, soldiers lost track. They squeezed the trigger expecting a shot and got a click instead. Crawford never had that problem. 6 rounds, 6 shots, no confusion. The experts said the revolver was obsolete. Crawford said the experts had never cleared a bunker. Here's what the experts forgot to calculate. Bunker clearing isn't about how many rounds you can carry. It's about how many rounds you can place exactly where they need to go in the first 2 seconds of contact. 6 aimed shots beat 15 wild ones every single time. And Crawford had spent years making sure those 6 shots were never wasted. William Crawford learned to shoot before he learned to read. He grew up on a ranch in West Texas during the Depression. His father was a cowboy who'd fought in the First World War and come home with a Colt revolver and a 1,000-yard stare. The revolver became young William's inheritance, not after his father died, but while his father lived. The old man taught him to shoot the way his own father had taught him. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. They practiced with empty brass casings balanced on the barrel. If the casing fell when you pulled the trigger, your technique was wrong. Too much jerk, too much anticipation. They practiced point shooting, bringing the revolver up and firing without looking at the sights, trusting muscle memory to align the barrel with the target. They practiced reloading until Crawford could swap out an empty cylinder for a loaded one in under 3 seconds. By the time Crawford enlisted in 1942, he could draw and fire 6 rounds into a playing card at 10 yards, faster than most soldiers could fire 2. The Army wanted him to carry a M1911. He qualified with it, scored expert. Then he went back to his revolver and never looked back. His commanding officers tolerated it because Crawford was too valuable to alienate. He was a natural combat leader, calm under fire, decisive and utterly fearless. If he wanted to carry an antique sidearm, they'd let him. The other soldiers mocked him, called him cowboy, asked if he needed a horse to go with his 6-shooter. Crawford just smiled and cleaned his revolver. They'd understand eventually. Crawford's first test came in Tunisia, February 1943. His squad was advancing through a rocky wadi when they walked into an ambush. German machine guns opened up from concealed positions above them. Within seconds, half the squad was down. Crawford dove behind a boulder. He could hear the wounded screaming. He could see the muzzle flashes from the German positions, and he could see something else. A something. Narrow goat path that led up the hillside, around the flank of the enemy position. He didn't ask permission. He just moved. 3 minutes of crawling brought him to a position behind the German machine gun team. 2 soldiers were manning the gun. A third was feeding ammunition. None of them were looking behind them. Crawford rose from the rocks like a ghost. His first shot hit the ammunition bearer in the back. The second hit the assistant gunner before he could turn around. The third hit the machine gunner as he finally started to react. 3 men, 3 shots. Under 2 seconds. The ambush collapsed. Without the machine gun, the remaining Germans retreated. Crawford's squad survived because a man with an obsolete revolver had done what a dozen soldiers with modern rifles couldn't. The mockery quieted after Tunisia. In Sicily, Crawford added to his reputation. During the assault on a fortified farmhouse, his squad was taking fire from a second-floor window. Every time they tried to advance, a German with a submachine gun drove them back. Crawford circled around, entered through a back door, and climbed the stairs. The German heard him coming. He spun around from the window, MP-40 swinging toward the stairwell. He was too slow. Crawford's first round hit him in the chest. The second made sure he stayed down. In Italy, the mountains became his hunting ground. The German army had fortified every ridge, every village, every river crossing. Progress was measured in yards. Each advance cost lives. Crawford became the man commanders called when something needed to die quickly and quietly. A sniper holding up an advance? Send Crawford. A machine gun nest in a stone farmhouse? Send Crawford. An observation post calling artillery down on American positions? Send Crawford. Each time he came back with the same report. 6 rounds expended, targets eliminated. His revolver became famous. Other soldiers started asking to see it, to hold it, to understand what made it special. Crawford told them the truth. It's not the gun. It's knowing that 6 is all you get. When you can't spray and pray, you learn to aim. June 8, 1944. 2 days after D-Day. Crawford's company was pushing inland from Utah Beach, fighting through the hedgerow country that would become legendary for its brutality. The hedgerows were ancient, thick walls of earth and vegetation that divided every field into a fortress. The Germans had fortified them perfectly. Every gap was covered by machine guns. Every approach was pre-registered for mortar fire. progress was measured in corpses. Crawford's squad was tasked with clearing a network of bunkers that anchored the German defensive line. Intelligence said there were 3 concrete emplacements connected by a trench system. The first bunker fell to a well-placed satchel charge. The second was abandoned by the time they reached it. The third was different. It was built into a hillside with thick, concrete walls and a single heavy door facing the trench. The machine gun inside had a clear field of fire covering 50 yards of open ground. Every approach was a death trap. They tried grenades. The bunker's walls swallowed the explosions. They tried rifle fire. The narrow gun slit was impossible to hit at distance. They tried flanking. 2 men died trying to circle around. The lieutenant was radioing for artillery when Crawford spoke up. "I'm going in." The lieutenant stared at him. "Through the front door? That's suicide." "Through the door, fast, close quarters." "With that revolver?" Crawford nodded. 6 men in there, maybe less. I only need 6. The lieutenant wanted to argue, but they'd been pinned down for 2 hours. More men were dying every minute, and Crawford had never failed yet. "Go!" Crawford moved. He sprinted down the trench, zigzagging to throw off the machine gunner's aim. Bullets cracked past his head. Stone chips flew from the walls. For 50 yards, he ran through a corridor of death. Then he was at the door. He didn't hesitate. He kicked it open and threw himself inside. The interior was dark after the bright sunlight. He could see shapes. Movement. The machine gun was still firing out the slit. Its crew focused on the Americans in the field. His first shot hit the machine gunner in the side of the head. His second hit the assistant gunner before the man could understand what was happening. There were more. 4 more soldiers reaching for weapons, shouting in German, scrambling to react. Crawford's third shot, 4th, 5th, each one found its target. Each one dropped a man. 1 soldier remained, a young German with wide eyes and trembling hands trying to bring his rifle around in the cramped space. Crawford's 6th shot. Silence. He stood in the bunker, surrounded by bodies, his revolver empty. Smoke curled from the barrel. The smell of cordite filled the air. 6 rounds. 6 men. The weapon they called the weapon. Toy had just ended the lives of everyone who had stood against it. When Crawford emerged from the bunker, his squad was waiting in shocked silence. The lieutenant counted the bodies. 6 Germans, 6 bullet wounds. No misses. "How?" someone asked. Crawford ejected the spent casings and began reloading. "Front sight. Press the trigger. That's all there is." The story spread through the company. Then the battalion. By the end of the week, every soldier in the regiment knew about the sergeant with the cowboy gun who had single-handedly cleared a bunker with 6 shots. Nobody called his revolver a toy anymore. Crawford fought through the rest of the Normandy campaign, through the liberation of Paris, through the Siegfried Line and into Germany itself. His revolver was with him every step. By the war's end, he had been credited with eliminating over 40 enemy soldiers in close combat, more than most infantry squads achieved together, and he'd never switched to a M1911. The revolver didn't disappear after World War II. Military forces around the world continued issuing them for decades. British forces carried Webley revolvers into the 1960s. American pilots carried lightweight revolvers as survival weapons into the Vietnam era and beyond. The qualities that Crawford valued, simplicity, reliability, consistent trigger pull, never stopped being valuable. Today, many special operations units allow their members to choose their own sidearms. Some still choose revolvers. The weapon that critics declared obsolete a century ago still has its defenders, because the lesson Crawford taught is timeless. Capacity doesn't equal effectiveness. Speed doesn't equal accuracy. Modern doesn't equal better. What matters is placing rounds on target when everything is chaos and your hands are shaking and death is 3 feet away. What matters is knowing your weapon so well that aiming becomes instinct. What matters is having the confidence that when you pull the trigger, the shot will go exactly where you intend. Crawford had that confidence. His revolver gave him that confidence. And 6 rounds were all he ever needed. Sergeant William Crawford survived the war. He went home to Texas, married his high school sweetheart, and raised cattle on the same ranch where his father had taught him to shoot. He kept the revolver in a case above his fireplace. cleaned, oiled, and ready to fire, even though he never needed to fire it again. When his grandchildren asked about the war, he didn't tell stories of glory or heroism. He told them about the men he'd served with, the friends he'd lost, the cost of everything. But sometimes, late at night, he'd take down that revolver and hold it in his hands. 6 shots. That's all you get. Make them count. If this story of precision over firepower and skill over technology resonated with you, smash that subscribe button right now. This channel uncovers the forgotten stories of World War II, the soldiers, the weapons, and the moments that actually made the difference between victory and defeat. Tap the bell so you never miss an upload, and drop a comment below. I want to know, would you have trusted an old revolver in combat, or would you have grabbed the modern semi-automatic like everyone else? Share this video with someone who appreciates real military history. And check out the video on screen right now for another story of underestimated warriors and their unconventional methods. I'll see you in the next one.